In this video, we're going to carry on with our plasticity car modeling series, so stay tuned. Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and in this video, we are going to carry on modeling this concept car. And what we're going to be doing is fixing a few things. So we're going to get rid of this little ridge I put in the middle. And then we're going to start building out the windscreen, the glass, the rest of sort of the roof line of this. I think we're going to end up doing the front and the rear as sort of the final bits, because I think getting the windscreen, the glass, the roof, all that is going to help set the overall shape of the car. So what we want to do to get started is we want to get rid of this this mirrored side, and then we're going to get rid of this center section here. So select and do Shift Delete. We're going to go ahead and do that, Shift Delete, and just kind of work our way back. And then it'll separate this from the rest of it. We can just delete that. And with that separated, we can mirror this across, and then we can fill in the gap. Now, unfortunately, we can't just loft from one side to the other, because what's going to end up happening is the front and the rear edges aren't going to be quite right. So we want to make sure that we use this bridge curve, make sure that we are on that edge. We'll set both of these to 0, G1 continuity, and then we'll do the same thing on the back. So edge to edge. If you happen to see this, notice that second selection is listed as 0. And what usually happens is we didn't actually select the edge. So we need to redo that. Make sure that we are on the correct edge, because sometimes you can get a projected reference or a reference to the coordinate system underneath. So if you happen to see 0 there and you know that your the vertex is not at quite the end, then just make sure you redo the selection. Now we're going to go to our edge selection, and we're going to loft between these two. So just make sure you work your way back. And the order of the selection I don't think really matters. It's just going to go from one side to the other. G1 is fine, and then shift select these guys there. And we can get rid of the curves. And one thing that we need to do from a front view is we need to add a line. So Shift and A if you're using a shortcut key. And the reason we need to add a line is because we need to cut this. So C for cut. And then now we don't really need the stuff on the left side. So I can get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. And then I can join these two together with J. So now we've got that nice smooth transition in the middle, got rid of that little bump, which we can always put that back. But for right now, it just doesn't make sense because it's just going to complicate the process. So the next thing that we kind of need to figure out, and this can happen from the top or the side, is we need to figure out where the top and the bottom of the windscreen are going to be. Now, looking at this, most of what we see here is going to go away. It was kind of a placeholder shape, and it's just there to kind of help us guide the sort of the middle of the car, but nothing there is set in stone. So we're likely going to get rid of most of it. And definitely don't fall into the trap of thinking that this is a good edge or reference for the windscreen. It might be, but it's a good idea for us to make sure that we play around with where this needs to be. Now, for me, what I want to do is I want to kind of look at this thing from the side. The side is really going to help me, and I am going to I'm going to hold down Control or Command if you're on a Mac to make sure that my little tooltip there doesn't say face. We want it to say YZ. And then I'm going to just draw a line. So the line is going to represent our windscreen. Now, for right now, it's a straight line, so we're just going to move the endpoints around. I don't really care that it goes below the body right now. In general, that's kind of what happens. If you look at pretty much any modern car, the windscreen goes quite a bit below where the A-pillar stops. And then we're going to have to deal with the hood and details of the hood anyway. So right now, I'm just looking for really where this endpoint is and what this angle is going to be. Now, obviously, windscreens aren't flat. So once we're happy with the endpoint, we're going to rebuild it. And then we are going to select those two intermediate points and use G and G to kind of give it some shape. Now, this, again, is a concept. It can This windscreen can be pretty low, too low for actual passengers because, again, you'll see that a lot with concept vehicles. They're kind of exaggerated shapes, and then when they get to a production version, it's a bit more muted in most cases. So what we're really looking for is something that's kind of long, low, and stretched out. We want to make sure that where it ends on the body makes sense and the shape of it from the side makes sense. Now, once we're happy with kind of that rough shape, we're going to add another line, so Shift and A, and we're going to come back to the back. And as I'm looking at this, I want to leave the back section that we have here, so I'm going to hit Escape. And what I want to do is use Control and R and just divide up this back section. So I'm going to do it from a top view. We'll do Control R and just pick where we want to break it up. And then I'm going to do the same thing in the middle because we're going to need it there and just snap to that point. So essentially, most of what's in here is going to get deleted. I'm going to keep a small section over here, but we're going to get to that in just a bit. But what I want to do for this point is I want to go from the end of the windscreen to the edge that we just split. Remember, this is all 2D, it's all planar. And then rebuild it, and then start to give it some shape. Now, right at this moment, I'm not concerned with tangency at the back. It might be something that I want to handle, but for right now, I'm not too concerned with it. I just want to get a feel for the look of this. Now, is that too stretched out? Is it too long? Is it too low? Do we need to start moving some points around? Before we commit to building anything in 3D, this is a good exercise. So I'm going to move this up a little bit and then move these 2 points out a little bit, kind of stretch the shape and just get a feel for what that looks like. I think that looks okay. It kind of fits in the scale of the rest of the car. We've got a pretty long front end from where the windscreen is going to be, but a short back end, and I think that style kind of looks okay. This to me is looking a lot like maybe a modern version of a C3 Corvette, and that's okay. I mean, that's one of my favorite cars, probably why it's starting to look like this. So I'm just going to, again, just play around and tweak. We don't want these to be tangent, but in a lot of cases, what you end up seeing is the windscreen ends up having a smooth transition, and it will have tangency here, and that's something that we can work toward. But for right now, I am just roughing out the shape in 3D. So the next thing I'm going to do, from the top, I'm going to just draw a line from this intersection. Now remember, when you're looking at these default construction planes, that point that you snap to is going to be the height at which your curve is drawn. Now this is important because that's where we want this one. And the reason for that is because we want to figure out where the top of the windscreen is going to be. So I'm going to maybe put it, just say right there. So again, that's going to be planar. And what I can do is use bridge curve. I can go from this straight line over here to this end point. Now at the end point, it's going to be hard to see. Let's see if I can, let's turn off the faces. And actually, let's undo that bridge curve. So we're going to go from here to this end point, G0 at the end, and we want to make sure that we're at the complete start. So we can look at the shape. We can see if G1 makes more sense, G2, where it's starting to roll back quite a bit more. A lot of times what you end up seeing is more flat sections in the center, and as we get closer to the A pillar, it's going to roll back a bit more. It doesn't have to, but these are just the shapes that we need to kind of play around with. I'm going to use G1 for this and just cross my fingers and hope it works. And let's go ahead and bring the faces back. All right, another thing to consider is from the side, windscreens are not typically flat. Like when you look at it from the side, the bottom section is likely going to arc up. The top section is going to arc down. So what we need to do is take this and rotate it. So I'm going to hit R for rotate, but I'm going to reset the pivot point with V at the center here. And then from the side view, I'm just going to kind of rotate it down, let's say 7 degrees. That point should still be blue here. And because we rotated it and we didn't actually adjust the vertices individually, we should still have tangency going across there. But now what we're seeing is that transition of the windscreen there. All right, so we're making some progress. We're starting to build out somewhat of a curve network. From the front, you can see because we rotated it, it's starting to curve down a little bit. It's probably accurate. And the next thing we really need to figure out is where the A-pillar is going to hit the body. Now, this is where things might get a little tricky, but I'm going to start with Control R. I'm going to hit Tab, and I want to split the backup where I want the roof line to end. And I'm going to split it up again, hit Tab. So basically we're going to have the roof line end here, and then we're going to have it blend in to the rest of the quarter. So this section here is going to go away. Actually, all of this stuff is going to go away. But we want to carry this forward. Well, we don't need to carry the inside one forward, but this one here we want to carry forward. So Control R, snap to that point. We'll try it again, see what it looks like. So basically, when you take a look at, since we're using Corvette, if you take a look at maybe not the current Corvette because it's mid-engine, but the last generation C7 Corvette, you end up having this sort of A-pillar, and it transitions to a flat section of the body. And this is true all the way back to the C2, C3, C4 Corvettes. They kind of had the fender roll over, and then the canopy portion of it would intersect with it. And that's kind of what we're doing here. But it's a bit trickier here because we need to have the windscreen end somewhere. And if we just take this forward more, let's hit Tab. And if we just take that forward more, this is kind of too narrow for the windscreen. It needs to really come pretty far out here. So what this tells me is that this edge here isn't going to work. I'm going to hit delete. And this edge probably isn't going to work. I'm going to hit delete. And what I want to do is first I want to figure out where I want that windscreen to be. So I'm going to use Control R and maybe set it, about there. So that's going to be roughly where the windscreen is. And I'm going to do Control R here. And I know I said don't get into the trap of thinking that these edges are going to work for the windscreen. And the location of that edge isn't going to work, but the shape of it I think will work well with what we have here. They're pretty similar. So I'm going to just try it. And then I want to narrow this up a little bit. So Control R, hit Tab, and maybe make a narrow section there. And then we'll use Bridge Curve, and we'll connect these two together. So we'll do 1.0, 1.0, we'll do tangency on both of them, and then Shift and I to imprint that. And that way we sort of bridge those together. So basically what's going to happen is as we get to where the occupants sit, it's going to start to narrow the glass as it goes further back, which is fine because in reality, the person's shoulders are going to be right about this line on the door, so it doesn't really need to be very wide there. So what we're going to try to do is take a line and go from here to where the theoretical end of that A-pillar is. We'll rebuild the curve, and then from the front, we'll start to give it some shape. So generally, what ends up happening is it kind of goes up at a slight arc. That might be okay. And from the side, we also want to make sure that we are roughly matching the shape that we created for that windscreen. Now, remember, we can go back and we can have tangency here and a smooth transition. It's pretty close right now, so it would probably be okay. But we can always go back and fix that. And then the last thing that we want to do is take a line from here to where we want it to hit the body. We'll rebuild it. And from the side, we'll take, is there another point somewhere there? And we'll just try to match sort of the shape of that roof line. And then from the top, we maybe want to follow the line of the A-pillar. So I'm going to use G and G and kind of move it in. And again, nothing right now is tangent. We are just getting it visually close, which is perfectly fine. Now, if you want to make them tangent, actually, let's go ahead and save this. To save as concept car 8. Now, basically, I'm up-revving it for the next video since this is video 7. But if we want to make these tangent, we can always use bridge curve. And we can go from, let's say, here to this curve. Now we want to make sure that we are at the start because we don't want to mess with this A-pillar curve. And we can kind of get an idea for the shape. We want to make sure you view it from the side. You can see here that it's going above the roof line, which is not ideal. So I'm going to change both to G1. Maybe make this one go a bit closer here. But you see what's happening is it's driving that up and then it's dipping back down. And that's not a good solution. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to take it all the way to the end and just have that be my shape. Let's just take a look at that. We'll do the same thing here. We'll make sure that it's at 1 there. We're going to use G1 continuity for both. We'll take this one all the way to the end. And the shapes match pretty well. So I think that might work. Let's go ahead and just try it, see what it looks like. If it doesn't look right, we can just get rid of it. The last bit of this is we have this A-pillar point on the body right here. And that's fine. But this A-pillar point is below the body. We didn't finish off where that A-pillar or where the glass actually was going to be. So if we want to use this edge for the glass, we can, but keep in mind it's quite a bit higher. Then what we need to do is we need to move this curve, which is kind of tricky because now what we've actually done is we've did a bridge curve here, blended it. But let's go ahead and let's just try to move it and see what happens. So I'm going to do GG, hold down Control or Command. Take a look at this thing from the side and maybe just move this vertex here. Now, if I only move this vertex, I am still missing with tangency. I do have a potential problem there, but let's just go ahead and roll the dice and see what happens. So E to extrude. I want this as a tangency reference, same thing here. We're not going to have a tangency reference at the back. I'm going to go ahead and hide these curves for now. Let's go to our edge selection and we'll go from here to here. We'll create a loft. This is a guide. We'll shift select these two edges as a guide and make this G0. Go back to my all selection and hide that. We can actually hide that and the A-pillar curve as well. And now let's build the back. So back to my edge selection, we're going to loft from here to here. This is a guide, should allow tangency. Hold down Shift and select these. This will be G0 because we didn't make sure that these curves are tangent here. What we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up basically cutting that last section and blending it if we need to. But make sure that we're tangent at the mirror or midline and tangent at the windscreen. Go back to our all selection. We'll hide and hide. And the main reason I'm hiding those is because I don't know at this point if I'm going to need them or if I want to change anything. So I'm going to go ahead, and that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and hide our edges. Just look at it from the front. So that shape is okay. It kind of falls in line with the fender okay. From the side, I think that looks pretty good. From the top, I think it looks pretty good. So I think we're okay with what we've done so far. Once again, just like with the hood line, just like with the fender flares, as the shape progresses, if we don't like it, we can always go back and make changes. Now, the next bit here gets a bit tricky. Now, the reason it gets tricky is because right now we've got essentially a sharp edge right here. So if we start building the glass, we don't actually have a true A-pillar. Now, it's true that we could just fill the section in and we could add a fillet on the corner. Even if we did a variable fillet where it's wider at the bottom and narrower at the top, that would be fine. However, in reality, there are no A-pillars that take that simple shape. Now, they're just a bit more complex than that. So what's probably going to end up happening is we need to split some of what we did here and make room for an A-pillar. Now, currently, we've split this section up, and we've got a sharp corner here. But what we could do is we could determine what we want that shape of the A-pillar and the transition to look like, and we could build it out. So I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to do this. First, I'm going to join these together as one, and I'm going to just call this glass for now and then hide it. So this is the corner where we have our A-pillar transition. Now what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to use a bridge curve going from here to here. And actually, you know what? Let's turn off faces. It might be a little bit easier to see. And we'll do a bridge curve from here to here. And just play around with the numbers. Kind of figure out where it sits. And let's try G1. So G1 is going to be somewhat close to a fillet. If we do G2 on both of them or G3 on both of them, it's going to push it closer into the corner. And then if I right click, now I've got this sort of bridge curve where the A-pillar should be. And if I bring the glass body back, you can see that basically what we have is we've got this A-pillar shape, but it kind of overlaps where we're working. So what we need to do is hit Control R. I'm going to hit Tab, and I'm going to try to snap to that point. And it's not going to necessarily work because these two are not connected. So it wants to go down onto the hood. But what we can do is we can get it relatively close. So I'm going to get it close there. And then I'm going to do Control R and get it relatively close here. Now here we can actually snap because this bridge curve was on this body. But the reason we did that is if we bring the faces back, this was just temporary. Oops, let's go ahead and delete the curve, not the body. That was just temporary, but now we actually have some selection. So I can grab the edge of the windscreen and I can grab this. And now I can go to 100%. Actually, let's take that back. Let's do one thing different. Let's duplicate this. Shift D. And then I'll hide the body. So this will make it a little bit easier to see. We're going to go from this edge here to this edge here. So that one will be at 100%. This one should be at 0, which is that starting point. And we'll do G3 continuity. Doesn't like it. Let's try G2. And then we'll accept. All right, so this isn't needed, but let's see what we got. What is this? Oh, that's not needed. That's not needed. Here we go. So now that we have got this curve here, we can use Shift I to imprint. And what we should have done is now we should have broken that thing up. Okay. The next thing that we need to do is Control R, hit Tab. And basically what we're doing is we're splitting up the glass. So I'm going to take these sections and I'm going to do Alt and J. And the reason I want to do Alt and J is because I don't necessarily know if this is the right direction to go. I might decide that I want to actually do a sharp corner and a fillet. So I just wanted to unjoin that with the rest because I can always go back and put it back on again. But now we've got this curve here, this edge. We've got the edge of this, but we need to define the other section of that A-pillar. It's going to end up here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this edge. So I'm going to say Shift D, and I'm just going to move it just a little bit out and just a little bit back. And when we look at it from the side, basically what I'm doing is I'm defining that other curve. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, but duplicating that edge is a good starting point. So I'm going to take this entire curve, G and Z, and move it down just a little bit. So when we view it from the side, we also want these 3 points to come down a little bit. So I'm going to move them all three together. Then I'll move these two a little bit more, and then this last one a little bit more. And then I need to connect things. So I'm going to take this point, GG, hold down Control, and we want to find that edge end. So that should put it right at the end of this edge here, which means that if we start to do a loft or a patch, we'll be able to use those. And then we need to do the same thing on the back here. So this needs to connect to that vertex. So I'm going to select that vertex on the curve if I can get it. Let's do a box select. We'll do GG and hold down Control and get that edge end. So hopefully this works out okay, but let's give it a shot. So edge selection, we're going to go from here to here with a loft. We're going to select this and make it G0. And you see that it's already not liking it. Now, part of the reason it's not liking it is because if we zoom way in, those edges aren't connected. Now, part of the reason for that is because the glass, the stuff isn't connected to the rest of the body. And there's a tiny gap that needs to be healed there. The way that we're going to get around that is by deleting some of this stuff that we don't need. So I'm going to select some of this inside stuff. We'll go back here, grab that. Stuff I know I don't need anymore, and we'll do Shift Delete. So now we can join these two together. If we do J, what we should get is, go to our curve selection, we should be able to select that tiny little bit there, and it should have tangency. Could potentially present a problem, but we'll find out in a second. So we're going to go from here to here. We're going to loft. I am going to hold down Shift, set that to G0. So that's working. And on the back end, Shift, set that to G0. And then we'll need to reset the front to G0. And now we've got somewhat of an A-pillar. So that looks better than if we just did a fillet. I'm going to go ahead and delete that curve and join these together. Now, this could potentially present other issues for us. So, for example, it could be a problem when we go to build the glass. So, for example, you can see here, I've got this section where we need to blend things together. So what I'm going to do is delete this. And I want to break this body up with Control R. Actually, I want to do it with some lines. So line tool, we'll go from there, Shift I, which will break that section up. Now here, it's a little tricky because I don't want just a straight line here. So what I'm going to do is make a straight line there, and I'll make a line to where I want it to go. Let's see, maybe here. And then I'll do a bridge curve. So this one will be at 100, G0 on the end, G1 at the start, make it 0, get rid of that. And if I do Shift I with this one, it should only affect that roof section because the curve didn't go down into the door. If you make that curve too long, and because this is all one body, it will also break this up. So now we've got a little bit of a reference here. What we can do is go back to our edge selection, and we can loft between these. Now, I don't want any tangency at this point. I want to just do this with G0 and just take a look at what it looks like. I'm actually going to build the next one as well. Let's go ahead and do G0. And this one, now we can drive tangency here. We couldn't here because these curves that we had, they didn't have smooth transition. I'm going to go ahead and join all this together and just take a look at it. Let's hide our edges and just see what this is looking like. So even without tangency, you can kind of see how it's twisting, leaving this wide section here. The back is slowly transitioning to being flat. I think the glass is probably going to be a bit of a funky shape. I think that it needs a bit more work before we get there. So I don't think this face is going to work here. So we'll do Shift Delete. This one might work okay, but basically what I'm looking at is for the glass section, having it come narrow here and then go wide again isn't really going to work. It needs to kind of narrow down to here. So we almost need a bridge curve like from here to there to finish off the glass. I'm not sure if that's going to be the right solution, but kind of need something like that. Let me just look at this curve and see what it looks like. It might be okay. Before we commit to that one, let's go ahead and let's try going to this edge here. So 0, 100, we'll do G1 on both of them. And we'll just take a look at that curve too. So I don't think that one's going to work. I want to try one more. So same thing, but let's see, 100, 0, G0 on that one, G1 on this one. So basically what I'm trying to see is which of these is going to be a bit better. And I'm actually thinking neither of them. I want to carry that line, but I think what needs to happen is I think we need to fill this section in first. So loft with G0 and G1 there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to trim that. So I'm going to do a bridge curve from down here. I'm going to come up to maybe the middle of that edge. G0 on that one, G1 here. And then we'll do a cut. So let's get rid of that. I think that looks a bit better. Follows the lines a bit better. But it's still going to be problematic. Mainly because this shape right here. All right, let's try something else. So to that point, to here, we'll go to 100. We'll do G0 on the start. And maybe we will use that to shift I imprint. And then shift delete. Well, it's not looking like a great solution. I think it might need a little bit more finesse than this. We could cheat and just leave it open, but that's not any fun. So basically, when I'm looking at this, I want to see the bottom part of the windscreen look a bit different. I'm going to try one more thing. I'm going to try G0 on the end, G1 on the start, and what I'm trying to do is build out where the glass wants to go, kind of give it that rough shape. Let's turn off the faces. So basically, if we did a patch using that curve, which is on the inside here. So basically I'm trying to figure out is if we fill in all of this, what that's going to look like. I don't know if patch is going to work for this or not. It's not because it's not connected. But I definitely think that the direction we have right now is not working. I think that, oof, that looks ugly. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this curve and give this some more thought. I don't think I want that. Don't think I want that. And that little hook right there is not good. So I'm going to loft between these. G0. G1 there. So this basically is just giving me a surface to play with, and I'm going to join it to the rest for now. We can always unjoin it later or cut it out. And then what I want to do is I want to kind of figure out where the rest of this curve wants to go. So I'm going to just manually draw it for right now. And I'm thinking up to here, rebuild, and then just kind of visually play around with it. So if we hide the faces again, what I'm looking at right now is basically this shape right here. And that's what I'm trying to figure out is if I can project that up and cut it, how this is all going to work. So what we need to do is we need to do a bridge curve from here to, nope, it's getting really kind of tricky. Let's see, we'll go here. And I know this is probably not shown very well, but we're going to go here to here, 100% there, tangency on the end, and I'll do tangency on the exit as well. And we'll show the faces again. So now I'm going to take that and do Shift-I. So because of how I drew it, it should have tangency at this edge, and we should be able to just Shift-Delete some of this stuff. Now, I know that there is a hard transition here, so there is a sharp corner there, but I want to at least give this a shot. So all this should be joined together. Let's get rid of this curve. All that should be joined together. Go to our edge selection, and let's just try to patch it and see what it looks like. I guarantee that it's not going to look good, but I just at least want to see. If I drive tangency at the windscreen, it's not going to work here. Yeah, I was afraid of that. Set that to G0. Set that back to G0. I'm just going to accept it and take a look at it. Yeah, it's kind of like bubbling here. So this whole section here is just not working. So we're going to get rid of that. Shift-Delete, because patch will join it together. Shift-Delete. And then I need to trim the rest of this stuff. So let's try our old friend bridge curve again. This time coming from maybe there. We'll do G1 on both of them. We use Shift-I and get rid of some of these little sections. All right. So with that, I'm now going to try to patch this. I'm going to use a loft here with G0. It's not going to like that because there's a little section down here. All right. So L for loft, G0. We'll add that with G1 tangency. Whenever we've got an extra little section like that, it causes problems for us because of things like this. In some cases, you can select and delete that. If we hide the edges, you can see that it's adding this sort of funky little crease there, which is obviously problematic. So one of the ways that we can get around that is by doing Control-R. And I was going to try to trim that, maybe there. I'm going to go to my All selection, Shift-Delete, Delete, and then I will join these together. So now if I try to do all these edges, make sure I get this little one down here, and use Patch, it should be a little bit cleaner. Patch does a better job with those because when we're doing a loft, it's trying to go edge to edge. So if we have two edges on the bottom and one on the top, it's going to put a crease somewhere. Patch is much better at sort of dealing with that. So you can see that looks quite a bit smoother. And now, theoretically, this shouldn't be too horrible. So let's try it. Patch. And it looks like there's probably a missing small edge somewhere. So it's not liking that. It's probably down here. Yeah, for some reason it's not liking it. All right, well, I'm going to try to delete this edge. And I'm going to hold down. So with this is actually a true loop. If I hold down Alt or Option on a Mac, should grab the entire thing. patch. Now we got it. So I'll do G1 there. Everything else will be G0. Yeah. Not perfect, but not horrible. I think that this transition could be better, but it's a little tricky to do. So if you want to try to get tangency here, you can always go back and say Shift delete these two, and then go to our edge selection, hold down Alt, and then try to patch them. This time using G1 continuity on both sides. But you can see that it's failing back here. We could try to do a loft from one to the other. You can use this as a guide at the bottom with G0. But again, there's tiny little pieces down here that are going to cause problems, like little disconnects. So let's try patch one more time. Yeah, just when I get to that one, it doesn't like it. So pretty much that means that if we're going to do this method, I need to get rid of more. And maybe even this piece here. So it's like that, Shift delete. Going to hold down an Alt and grab that loop. Actually, now it's trying to grab the whole thing. Why is it grabbing the whole thing now? All right, let's go to edges, Alt, patch, tangent, 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 tangent. I'll keep trying to do tangency all the way back. It's probably going to put a little bit of a bump or a ridge here, which is actually fine. I think based on what we're doing, that's okay. And I'm going to leave G0 at the bottom because that's a sharp edge. Yeah, it gives us a little bit of shape to it. That's okay. All right, well, we're over 40 minutes. You know, as I've mentioned in all these videos, this is kind of real time going through this. So we're going to encounter problems. Geometry is not going to work. We need to kind of work around it. But I think so far, I think everything looks pretty good. There may be some funkiness with the A-pillars. I am going to inset the glass and add some more detail to the roof. There's still a lot to do, but I think so far, other than blending some stuff together, I think the shape works pretty well. And I think that we've got a pretty good start here. I think the glass looks okay. It's not ideal, but it's going to get cut in and inset here. So any like bulge that happens right there is not really going to be an issue. So that's all something that we can deal with. We can sort of sink it in a bit. But remember, just kind of like how we started, making sure that you get the general shapes down and then work on adding the detail can be really helpful. Leaving sharp edges where you want to go back and maybe play around with it. Those can all be really helpful tips and tricks, because trying to get all the detail in when you get started, especially if you don't have a blueprint to work from and you're just kind of playing around with shapes in 3D, it can be really tricky. So I think we're at a good spot. I'm going to go ahead and save this. If you have any questions on what you've seen so far, please let me know. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.